In March of 2021, the border between Canada and the United States was closed to non-essential travel. This basically stopped everybody from crossing the border, except for truckers and others who work across the border. Since that time, we had vaccines, and the majority of Canadians and truckers have been vaccinated.
The U.S. president spoke today on the federal government's response to the pandemic. He also answered questions about those new restrictions that Evan told us about at the U.S.-Canada border.
I spoke with the Prime Minister, Trudeau. Very good relationship, obviously, between us and our two countries. And no tipping point. It's just that we want to isolate from the standpoint we don't want people coming into contact, because that's the way we're going to win this war. That is so important. And we both thought it was time. Now, it's not affecting trade. It's non-essential. It's non-essential crossings. It won't affect trade at all. And it was just something we thought would be good for both countries. Yes.
In January, truckers were required to show proof of vaccination to cross the border.
So let's bring in the CBC's Zuleka Nathu. She's live from Los Angeles. So Zuleka, let's break down these new measures that we hear at the border between the U.S. and Canada, and what is the impact they're likely to have?
Well, this is a reciprocal and collaborative agreement. Both governments have said that, and so the measures are similar on both sides of the border. The U.S. president was asked at that same news conference you just saw about the restrictions at the border, and he said that he wants to limit non-essential travel. Goods will continue to flow, and that is so important to know on both sides of the border, because the supply chain will not be affected. People who are worried about their local grocery store not having enough there, it shouldn't affect that in any way. Fuel, food, medication, necessities will continue to flow as normal on both sides.
Truck driver Luis Franco hauls fruits and vegetables from the U.S. to Canada. He's vaccinated and thinks all truckers going between the two countries should be too.
It's a matter of public health, period, and so we need to do our part, as citizens, to do what's right for everybody else.
Starting this weekend, unvaccinated Canadian truckers will have to quarantine for 14 days after crossing the border, making further routes impossible. American truckers will have to prove they're vaccinated or they won't be allowed in. This Montreal company imports hundreds of truckloads of produce from the U.S. each week. Its executive vice president says this policy is yet another disruption to the supply chain, and consumers will notice.
Every time that there's going to be less or more restriction at the border for any reason whatsoever, we are looking at price increase, and price increase goes directly to consumer.
The Canadian Trucking Alliance says most Canadian truckers are vaccinated, but says the 10% who aren't represent roughly 12,000 drivers. And the industry is already short-staffed. This driver is unvaccinated and says she will lose her job over this.
I will not be forced into any vaccine in this manner.
And with the supply chain already struggling to keep up with high demand for goods, having fewer drivers will be an added strain, says this expert.
Even a short temporary shortages of the truck drivers can create significant problems, especially for important things like, let's say, food.
This policy measure is intended to protect the supply chains and those who work in the supply chain.
More than 1,000 truckers in the capital city of Ottawa are protesting vaccination requirements for cross-border drivers. Well, now the Department of Homeland Security officials are warning that the trucker convoy could also disrupt the Super Bowl in Los Angeles this weekend and then make its way to D.C. for the State of the Union address.
Started as a group of truckers protesting COVID-19 vaccine mandates called the Freedom Convoy. That's what they call themselves. It's snowballed now to sort of blockade in Canada for days. We've seen chaos in Ottawa. That's Canada's capital city, of course, as truckers protest the new vaccine order, which requires truckers entering Canada to be fully vaccinated or face testing and quarantine requirements.
Truckers had it easy. Many businesses had to close down, and many of them will never open again.